The stream has started. And let me count if we have enough. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, is Doug with us? Is Doug joining today?
Yeah, I'm with you.
Oh, fantastic. And then I think I see Dustin joining. So I think we have 9. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Sorry, that was the longest reboot ever. Yeah, I think we have 9, unless I'm counting wrong.
Yeah, I think it's a total of 9 today, Rebecca.
Yeah, I see 9. Okay, so we have 9 on. Sarah, you want me to go ahead and start?
Yeah, before you do, I just wanted to comment on what Dustin just said. Both MC and Dustin this morning got notifications on their laptops that they would have to restart. So it's possible that other members using their state computers will also get that notification. So if you do, just to make sure that we maintain a quorum, just message me in the chat and I'll give you the go ahead to restart if you need to, making sure that we have enough members present to continue the meeting.
Okay. Can we snooze the restart? Is that an option?
Did you get the option to snooze it?
I think I did have that option, but I tried it before when we were in a meeting when we were mapping, and I remember it basically I snoozed it twice, and then it's like the third time it didn't it made me do it. So yeah.
It usually gives you about like an hour notice. So hopefully we can do stages of people doing it.
And looks like Dustin's given us some tips too in the chat.
Okay.
And we're ready to go when you are.
All right. As chair of the commission, I call this meeting of the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission to order at 10:01 a.m. This Zoom webinar is being live streamed on YouTube on the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting channel. For anyone in the public watching who would prefer to watch via a different platform than they are currently using, please visit our social media at Redistricting MI. Our live stream today includes closed captioning, ASL interpretation, in Spanish, Arabic, and Bengali translation services will be provided for effective participation in this meeting. Email us at redistricting@michigan.gov for additional viewing options or details on accessing language translation services for this meeting. People with disabilities needing other specific accommodations should also contact redistricting@michigan.gov. This meeting is being recorded and will be available at www.michigan.gov/MICRC for viewing at a later date. This meeting is also being transcribed, and those closed caption transcripts will be made available and posted on the michigan.gov/MICRC website, along with written public comment submissions. There is also a public comment portal that may be accessed by visiting michigan.gov/MICRC. This portal can be utilized to post maps and comments, which can be viewed by both the commission and the public. Members of the media who may have questions before, during, or after the meeting should direct those questions to Edward Woods III, Communications and Outreach Director for the Commission, at woodse3@michigan.gov or 517-331-6309. For the purposes of the public watching and for the public record, I will turn to the Department of State staff to take note of the commissioners present.
Morning, commissioners. Please say present when I call your name. Because we're all attending virtually this morning, please also disclose where you are attending remotely from when I call on you. I will call on you in alphabetical order, starting with Doug Clark.
Present, and I'm attending the meeting from Macomb County, Michigan.
Juanita Curry.
Present, and I'm attending remotely from Detroit, Michigan.
Anthony Eade.
Present, remotely attending from Detroit, Michigan.
Brittany Kellum. Rhonda Lang. Steve Lett. I think you're muted, Commissioner Lett. We can come back to you. Cynthia Orton.
Present, attending remotely from Battle Creek, Michigan.
MC Rothorn,
Present, attending remotely from Lansing, Michigan.
Rebecca Satella,
Present, attending remotely from Wayne County, Michigan.
Janice Follett,
Present, attending remotely from Highland, Michigan.
Aaron Wagner, Richard Weiss,
Present, attending remotely from Saginaw Township, Saginaw, Michigan.
Dustin Witches,
Present and attending remotely from Howell, Michigan.
and I'll return to Steve Lett.
Present. Attending remotely from Lee County, Florida.
Thank you. 10 commissioners are present and there is a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Reinhardt. As a reminder to the public watching, you can view the agenda at www.michigan.gov/MICRC. I will now entertain a motion to approve the meeting agenda.
So moved.
Motion made by Commissioner Witches,
Second.
seconded by Commissioner Rothorn. Is there any discussion or debate on the motion? All right, seeing none, it is moved and seconded that the meeting agenda be adopted. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, raise your hand and say nay. And Doug Clark, if you could please verbally indicate.
Aye.
Aye, okay. By a vote of 9-0, is that correct, Sarah Reinhardt? I believe the agenda is adopted.
We have 10 commissioners present.
Oh, we have 10 commissioners present. Okay, so 10-0. All right, the meeting agenda is adopted. Without objection, we will now begin public comment pertaining to agenda topics portion of our meeting. Hearing no objection, we will proceed with public comment. Individuals who have signed up and indicated that they would like to provide live remote public commentary to the commission will now be allowed to do so. I will call on your name and our staff will unmute you. If you are on a computer, you will be prompted by the Zoom app to unmute your microphone and speak. If you are on the phone, your voice will say the host would like you to speak and prompt you to press *6 to unmute. I will call on you by your name. Also, please note that if you experience technical or audio issues or we do not hear from you for 3 to 5 seconds, we will move on to the next person. When they are done speaking, we will return to you. If your audio still does not work, you can email redistricting@michigan.gov and we will help you troubleshoot so that you can participate during the next public comment period at a later meeting. You will have 1 minute to address the commission. Please conclude your remarks when you hear the timer. First in line to provide public comment is Mr. Anthony Scannell. Please wait for our staff to unmute you.
Well, good morning, MICRC commissioners. Anthony Scannell and joining you from Detroit today. And, I know we've been talking a lot, or you guys have been talking a lot about how to improve the process, lessons learned video, and I'll believe you me, I have quite a bit of those. I bet you could believe it. But I think you're jumping the gun. I think it's a little too, it's never too soon to prepare for whatever comes forward, but I think you're jumping the gun. And kind of like the mapping process itself, I think you're kind of skipping over some important parts that need to be done and, rushing to arbitrarily set finish lines. And the reason I say that is we don't even have the explanatory report yet. There's 2 reports in the Constitution, the reference materials and the explanatory, and we don't even have that. And wow, I thought that would have to be hashed out in open deliberations. I didn't know it was going to be MDOS writing it in the back room. Who knows? But so, yeah, that's how I feel about the lessons learned. I'll get to that when I'm ready. And I know you're getting a lot of high praise. And
Thank you for addressing the commission, Mr. Scannell. Next in line is Mr. James Gallant. Please wait for our staff to unmute you.
James Gallant, Marquette, these are my opinions. Please disregard the rules of procedure draft that was presented to you for today because it specifically contradicts the Michigan's Open Meetings Act because it says that you can reconvene a special meeting in 15 hours notice. and 18 hours is the minimum, but I would ask you to please set that at 3-day notice so that the public will know and be able to participate at this first reconvening meeting. And please make the public comment back to 2 minutes, because now that you don't have the pressure of all the people, then they can go back, and that'd be an onus on you. And second, please request that Dr. Nancy Wang come to your meeting and present to the MICRC concerning her public statements that they have intervened in 2 prior lawsuits before on your behalf and won. And well, the one that they did in August 30th, 2018 on the VNP cross complaint determined that the Michigan Independent Citizen Redistricting Commission is a reconvened reiteration of the Commission on Legislative Apportionment, and that the rules of procedure that were approved by that Apportionment Commission apply here.
Thank you for addressing the commission, Mr. Gallant. Next in line is Mr. Chris Andrews.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you. Mostly I want to thank you for the collaborative work that you've made over the last several months, and how your votes reflected the will of the people. There were a lot of us that were counting on both of those things happening, and they did, and we owe a debt of gratitude to you. We always expected this would end up in court, and there's some court challenges, and they may be asking you to make some changes, and I urge you to continue that collaboration and spirit of honoring the will of the people. It feels like there's some effort going on to do some polarization right now. I'd encourage you to be thinking about improvements to the Hickory map now. Many of you agreed that you ran out of time, and if the court asks you for improvements, you should be ready to do that. Thank you very much, and good luck the rest of the way.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Okay, that concludes our public comment for this morning. I would like to mention that all emailed and mailed public comment is provided to the commission before each meeting, and the commissioners also review the public comment portal on the www.michigan.gov/MICRC website on a regular basis. We appreciate everyone who provides public comment in whatever way they choose to do so, and invite you to keep sharing your thoughts, especially if you'd like to share ways that the MICRC process or procedures could have been more effective, or in ways that you think they were good the way they were. First on our agenda is unfinished business item 5A, potential options for further modifications of the rules of procedure, which was discussed at the last meeting. We have General Counsel Pastula and MDOS Chief Legal Director Mike Brady in the meeting, if commissioners would like to ask any questions regarding these options. Commissioner Orton?
Well, I just think that somehow we need to figure out what needs to be accomplished before we end as a commission, and how that's going to look exactly when it ends, because when the legal challenges are complete, even though we know there could be some in the future, but when any that are filed right now are complete, then we end, and we don't want to just end without tying up all the loose ends. So I think we need to figure out how we're going to tie up all the loose ends and what that's going to look like. And then if we need to reconvene, how that's going to happen.
General Counsel?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Good morning, Madam Chair, and good morning to the Commission. I have submitted the memorandum dated January 25th and a supplemental memorandum based on the questions raised at the January 27th MICRC meeting. So you have the benefit of the February 9th memorandum as well. And the issues raised are, again, the opportunity or ability to convene remote meetings moving forward language, and then also the language regarding reconvening the commission. So that is what is before, and I'm happy to prepare the language in more final form after the commission has its discussion today. Thank you.
Any additional questions, comments, commissioners? Mike Brady, I have some comments for you, or some questions, if you're there. I see a name, but no picture. There you are. Okay, so I did read both the proposed amendment and the supplemental memo, and I still have some concerns about how we're going to handle this. So the supplemental memo was specifically addressing this concept that we're going to be sued, the Secretary of State's going to reconvene us, and then it seemed like it was implying that the purpose of our being reconvened was to potentially draw more maps, not to defend the lawsuit. And so given the fact that, assuming cases are filed in the Supreme Court of Michigan Supreme Court, we have this very, very short time frame to respond, 7 days. What is it that you imagine is the mechanism that's going to take place? Because obviously, if we're disbanded, we no longer have a chair. And so the Secretary of State would be the only party under our current structure who could be served. So the Secretary of State would be served, and then presumably the Secretary of State would reconvene the commission. Are you anticipating that the Secretary of State is then going to institute the defense of that litigation, or are we expecting or planning that on a 7-day time frame that we're going to quickly reconvene within that 15 hours of that notice, and then have counsel on deck who can step in and respond to that complaint within 7 days? It just seems like I want to make sure we're thinking through the process and making sure that we're not potentially handicapping ourselves. And I just want to know like what your thoughts are on how we're going to handle that. You're on mute. I still can't hear you. I'm sorry. No. All right.
Maybe Rebecca, one of the things that I if I may, it's sort of as what Cynthia brought up is also important for me. Like I hear we're sort of talking about what we'll do when we reconvene. And I'm also thinking about, right, one of the things that you bring up is like our staff, right? It's not just the commission, but it's our staff.
Right.
And so, and it feels like we've got some things where we're considering, extending contracts and things like that. And then it looks like we're not just extending staff contracts or we're discussing extending staff contracts. We also have these consulting contracts. And I see that there is a limit, right? That we can extend it for 1 year, but but it ends at a certain point, that extension of a contract. So I think, it's important for me. Yes, I want to understand how we reconvene, but also, right, we really have staff, and what that looks like, and is it an executive director that we maintain for years, and can we actually maintain staff without being in session or whatever it is that we're, that's right. The question, I suppose. And I think so it's the wrapping up and the reconvening that is important. I think it's related.
Well, and I think that that's sort of my point, is that how are we going to handle the response to future litigation? Because if we are disbanding as a commission, actually I shouldn't say disbanding as a commission, because the commission will stay in place. But if the commissioner's terms expire by virtue of the language of the Constitution, we do have this very short time frame to respond to litigation. It's 7 days in the Michigan Supreme Court. So we really need to think through and make sure that we have a structure in place that if that happens and the Secretary of State is reconvening us, that we already have sort of our ducks in a row in terms of responding. And that might mean having Baker Hostetler or Fink Bresic on some sort of retainer agreement where they can immediately step in. And then we also need to think about the data too, because we have this body of information related to our work, and we will no longer have access to that as commissioners, because my understanding is once we're no longer commissioners, then, our phones are being turned back in, our computers are being turned back in. So then who is going to have that body of data that those lawyers, assuming it's Baker, Hostetler, or someone else, that they're going to be able to access in 7 days to be able to write a, compelling response? It's a bit of a, it's going to take some planning. It's not something that I think we should just, put a rubber stamp on and move on. I think we need to really think about what procedures we want to put in place now to enable us to be effective so we don't end up having a default. Commissioner Orton.
Just on that same line, I was just thinking back to when we first began. Of course, we could do it faster this time, but not within 7 days. If we turn in our computers and our phones and everything, how are we going to meet? How do we how do we move forward? It seems very confusing to me. So we do need to work it out.
Yeah. And that could be something as simple as, we have a file that's maintained by the Department of State where they have, our email addresses and our alternate phone numbers where they can contact us. I just think this needs to be a robust policy. This needs to really be thought through, particularly, and once Mike Brady is able to actually get on and talk to us, if the Department of State is going to jump in and defend us, I think that alleviates some of those concerns, but I don't know that they have an obligation to do that. And I don't know if constitutionally it's clear that they could do that, because technically it's our job to defend. So what process are we going to put in place to make sure that someone can't use that 7-day period against us to file a complaint, and then we can't respond, and then we default on the litigation because we don't file a response within 7 days? Commissioner Eid?
Well, I think you bring up a lot of really good points, Chair Zatella. And another thing to consider is we might not want to put the onus on the Department of State. Well, we have a good relationship with the Department of State today. There's no telling if we're going to have a good relationship.
Can you hear me now?
In some states. Yep,
Hey, we can hear you, Mike Brady. Did you happen to catch all of that discussion? I'm not sure. I know you were trying to dial in.
I caught most of it. I'm very sorry for interrupting, Commissioner Eid. I think you're speaking. Please continue, and then I can jump in.
Glad to have you on here, Mr. Brady. Yeah, there's no telling if we're going to have the same type of working relationship with departments of states or the Secretary of State, or any lawyer who might want to defend us in the future. So I wouldn't want to put it in the hands of an outside entity. I'd rather figure out a way to keep us as independent as possible in that regard.
So go ahead, Mr. Brady.
Good morning. I was going to say again, but you didn't hear me the first time. Nice to see you all and be with you this morning. A lot of great points, Commissioner, various commissioners and Chair Zatella. I appreciate, the questions and just thinking through these in a transparent way. I guess I'll say up front that I don't know that, as much as I appreciate the points and appreciate the questions, I'm not sure that any of us can have definitive answers to some of these things at this time. This strikes me as, once again, what we all have experienced, being the inaugural folks who get to, for you to serve on the commission, and for me and Sarah and folks on our team and your own staff to serve the commission for the very first time, and kind of making real the constitutional amendment and the language that so many folks had worked so passionately to put in place. I don't know, a few different points, I guess, along these lines. I think maybe to respond to the most recent one that Commissioner Eid, you had just raised in questions about a future secretary and the potential role, and whether a future secretary would be supportive of the commission or hostile to the commission, or other things along those lines. I hear you on that point. I understand that. It's something that I'm mindful of in my work, just generally speaking, because elections matter, and future secretaries may have a different perspective, not just on this, but all the other things we're doing in our office. And on this particular topic, I guess I go back to the Constitution and the individuals who drafted that language and who worked so hard in a bipartisan manner across the state of Michigan to get that enacted. And what that language says And again, that was written by folks who write in their name, voters, not politicians. They're incredibly skeptical. I mean, I think this is, certainly well established in the record, incredibly skeptical of establishment politicians, or just the establishment and politicians in general, evidenced both through their name and frankly, through the very efforts that they undertook to create this independent commission. And yet they understood that there are some things that need to be, there needs to be a steady hand on certain aspects. And it's very limited in the Constitution. But they wrote, and the people adopted the language that says the Secretary of State is a defined role and it will serve as the non-voting secretary of the commission. And so whether, I guess I would just say to each of you as citizens in our state, you should, maybe there should be a question that is asked of anyone who runs for office, for the office of Secretary of State, for how will they work with the commission and what will they do to support the commission and respect the commission's independence. But I think that may be, of all the questions posed here, the one that, I don't know, might very well have the clearest path. Now, what happens, to your question, what happens if a future Secretary of State doesn't take on their responsibilities and fails to comply or fails to do what they need to do? And, it probably involves a mandamus lawsuit, which is a type of lawsuit that exists not just in Michigan, but certainly used, here in Michigan, where you have to establish, you file it against a public official and say you have a duty to act and you have failed to act. I mean, there are other things to it, but at its basic level. And so if, for example, a future Secretary of State were to fail to comply with the application timeline, it's a very strict timeline, all the things that we did, and very, very involved process that we as an office undertook before any of you were ever seated. And it says, among the various deadlines, this is, for example, we have to seat you by October 15th of 2020. Our office, very supportive of this effort, seated you not by October 15th, but certainly by October 15th. We seated you almost a month earlier, by September 17th, 2020. But what if somebody missed it? Well, then anybody could file suit against the Secretary of State. Says the Constitution says the Secretary of State has to convene this commission by October 15th of the next one will be 2030. The Secretary has failed to do that. Court, please order her to do her job. And so that's the way that our system at large exists. And you see these kind of lawsuits brought against elected officials who have clear duties and responsibilities. And when there's an allegation, not always true, but an allegation that someone has failed to do their job. And so these are brought against local, county, statewide officials, frankly, on a regular basis. They're not always successful, but they often are when someone has actually failed to do their job. So that's kind of one thing that crossed my mind. To Chair Zotella, and I think I did miss, if Commissioner Orden, if Commissioner Rothman, if you had spoken during my technical issues, I think I did miss those, so I'd ask that you repeat it. But I do recall, I think, some of Chair Zotella's your questions and concerns about potential lawsuit and the necessity to defend that in short order. And would the Secretary of State or a future Secretary of State defend the maps? I, of course, don't know when a lawsuit will come, a future lawsuit will come challenging these maps. If it comes on the same schedule that it happened 10 years ago, or I say challenging the maps, that were, put in place 10 years ago, that hit, Julian, was it the 7th year of the maps? And so 7 years from now, regardless what happens with, other elections, 7 years from now, Secretary Benson will not be in office. If she wins re-election, she will be term limited. So either way, she won't be there. I most surely will not be in my role. So I can't speak to exactly what a future secretary would do, but I'd say if the lawsuit were to come while we were in office, our perspective, and I think you see this in the amicus brief that we filed with the Attorney General yesterday in the Legal and Voters case, our perspective is that as the non-voting secretary of the commission, we did everything we could to support you and to support your work, but we did not have a say or a role in the creation of the maps. And accordingly, it's not appropriate for us to attempt to defend the maps or to, certainly not to denigrate them either, but just that's not the appropriate role for us. Right. And I think it could even be problematic if we, just to play devil's advocate, if, a secretary could open themselves up if they try to defend the maps, but maybe they didn't do a very good job because they weren't invested, because they didn't actually draw it. And so a half-hearted defense, frankly, may be worse than no defense at all, because it could give the wrong impression. I also don't think that it's not clear to me that the Michigan Supreme Court would accept the secretary stepping in, any secretary stepping in and attempting to defend the commission's work, because it's very clear from the constitutional language that the commission draws the maps and the commission is responsible for those decisions. The commission hires its own staff, hires its own attorneys. And I think, of course, to the very thoughtful and thorough process that this commission undertook in hiring each of its staff members and each of its outside counsel and each of its contractors. And you did that for a reason, because you knew that, though the saying is lawyers are a dime a dozen, you knew that there were some lawyers you felt comfortable working with, that were going to be the right fit for this bipartisan and nonpartisan commission. And there were other lawyers that maybe didn't have the requisite experience or whatever else may have gone into, your analysis. So I think along those lines, I just don't know how that could, happen otherwise. To the question of service, and I'm speaking to address some of the different, points that were raised and questions that were raised. I think as a practical matter, if a lawsuit's filed in, 3 years or 7 years, the individual filing the lawsuit bears the burden of providing service. I mentioned they would look at the court rule. I'm just thinking like what I would do. You'd look at the court rule. This is a standard practice for lawyers who file lawsuits. The court rule says you get to serve the chair or the secretary. We know this, as the commission's now been sued 3 times. The plaintiffs would know that, it'd be easy to find out that the commission had gone dormant, and that there's not a chair at that point. So they would serve the secretary. I think the question then would be, would we, any secretary look at this and say, okay, well, we need to send this out. We should post notice of a meeting of the commissioners, see who is still eligible, whether, and may you all live a long time and have good health, but life happens. People get in car accidents. Things happen, and people may not actually be, any one of us, God forbid, might not be around, or simply may no longer be a registered voter in the state of Michigan, which means that you're not eligible to serve. And so life can happen in lots of different ways. But it's something as simple as that. You move to, God forbid, Ohio or, some other state and change your registration, and you're no longer able to serve. And so along those lines, the Constitution lays out a process for the secretary filling those vacancies. In fact, we've, of course, filled the vacancy twice, most recently with Chair Satella. So, there is a whole process for that. I think the question about, what the language expire means is a very fair question. I wonder, I don't know to what degree the drafters envisioned or kind of thought through a potential challenge that would happen, mid-cycle, in year 7, for example, like it did last time, when they chose the word expire. At the same time, I also see the language that General Counsel points to that says, under no circumstances does anyone else other than the commission draw the maps. And I don't know how to ultimately, exactly where the court would land with that. But it does seem that this would, right out the gate be a matter that the court itself would have to engage. And if a secretary sat on their hands and said, look, a future secretary or any secretary says, expire means expire means it's over, these commissioners no longer sit, and I'm not authorized as the secretary, this is all hypothetical, I'm not authorized as the secretary to even reconvene a new commission until 2030 per the language in the Constitution, then the very first question that the plaintiffs will have to engage when they file the lawsuit in the Michigan Supreme Court will be not just that these maps are violated, but also as to who is possibly able to, if the plaintiffs are correct, if they can bear the burden in their lawsuit that these maps have violated whatever they violate, whatever the allegation is, they're going to have to explain to the court who is allowed to draw the maps other than the commission. And if it is the commission, then there will be a clear, order to the secretary to convene the commission, fill out any gaps, confirms everyone still is eligible to serve, and get a commission together, if not in part to defend the maps, at least to act on that.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, were you?
No, it was a lot of speaking, responding to different friends, responding to different folks.
So here's my question for you. So in terms of like many things that we've seen with this commission, I mean, we're the first commissioners, and a lot of these things are issues of first impression for us in the world. And in terms of what expire means and the commission itself, the one thing that I keep coming back to is, can we, so let's assume we have the Secretary of State so empowered, and Secretary of State for whatever reason chooses not to act, and there is a mandamus action. Can our rules of procedure bind the Secretary of State to act by themselves? Because nowhere in the Constitution does it say that the Secretary of State has to reconvene the commission. It's just a void. There's like nothing addressing it. And so let's just say we even put into our rules of procedure that the Secretary of State reconvenes us, or we create some other process. And we could even put timeframes on that, say they have to reconvene us within 48 hours of service to speed up the time frame. Would we be able to, or somebody else, go into court and compel the Secretary of State to act under our rules of procedure? And you may not even know the answer to that, and you might have to look into it. But I just feel like there's a lot of uncertainty about this, and that's one of half a dozen questions that are out there.
Sure. Yeah.
And I feel like part of that is us all fumbling, because the constitutional amendment didn't really address that. My understanding is the reason why they didn't is because they thought there weren't going to be any later challenges, and that all the challenges would happen within the first year or two, and then there would be no need for us to be around. And so I don't even think the thought of us reconvening was a glimmer in the mind of voters, not politicians, when they wrote this. And I think that's part of the problem, because I think that could happen, and we need to have a way to address it and defend the maps. And I just don't know. We're almost creating a mechanism because there isn't one. So, but yeah, to that question, like, would we be able to enforce our rules of procedure against the Secretary of State? Would that even be binding on the Secretary of State? I don't know the answer to that. And I mean, you're much more savvy with government law, so maybe you do know, but.
I'm not sure that so I do appreciate the question. As I said at the outset, that I don't know that any of us can answer this definitively. I'm just thinking as a practical matter. If the commission doesn't do anything today on these rules, the question is likely still to come to a head, and it's likely to still come to a head that at some point after elections, one election, a few elections have occurred, and there's been sources of data, and people have the data that supports their argument. And so they will then file the lawsuit, and all those other things, kind of will flow from that. And that will be the question front and center. I don't see how the rules of procedure for the commission could possibly trump the language in the Constitution. But then we get kind of circle back to this language. Which language? Expire? What does expire mean? And there could be, an opportunity there versus who is allowed to draw the maps and who's allowed to change the maps. The Constitution also talks about the commission's ability to hire lawyers to defend its work, and the commission's ability to petition the legislature to pay for those lawyers, because this is, as you know, specialized expertise in the law, and you get what you pay for with the quality of that sort of thing. So for all of those reasons, I don't know that the standard 7-day engagement from the Michigan Supreme Court that makes sense, though it's it's expedited time frame and makes sense, whatnot. That may make sense and is workable here when you have existing lawyers on contract, existing staff in place. You're all engaged. You have all that in place. Lawsuits coming in 3 years from now or 7 years from now, none of us know where we'll be, or the condition we'll be in. Even if we're otherwise eligible, even if you are otherwise eligible to serve, and whether you'll be interested in doing so. And so to expect you to completely get on board, and then to expect your lawyers who knows where your lawyers will be, right? Same sort of thing. They may not be at the same law firm. They may have other conflicts that arisen because 7 years have passed. So there are a lot of other things that, as a practical matter, are very, very significant concerns. And ultimately, I think those are going to be the sorts of things where the language from the Constitution is going to be front and center. And probably the initial filing is going to say, among other, they might ask for like a, instead of a temporary expedited, temporary injunction or something, something kind of very abrupt right up front. It could be, an expedited mandamus ordering the secretary to convene the commission or something like that. And then I imagine the argument back and forth will be under what authority. And someone will probably make an argument that expire means, your particular term thus far, but but you're still the people, or so. I mean, who knows? But I imagine that's probably going to be the contour of, will necessarily be the contour of arguments back and forth, pitting that expire language and whatever people can argue that means versus all the other language in the amendment that authorizes this commission and this commission alone to defend the maps, to create the maps, to do all the other things about the maps.
MC and Dustin, I see both of you have your hands up. I'm not sure who was first. Do either one of you know?
I just wanted to acknowledge that Commissioner Clark wanted to speak to this.
Okay.
And that's why I had my hand raised.
Okay, Commissioner Clark?
Yes, I'd like to make a few comments relative to what Mike Brady and Rebecca have been talking about. It's, as you know, for the past year and a half, my focus has been consistency in the way we do things. And to me, when I look at this item, the consistency that's important is to keep the commission intact. They're the ones that have the knowledge. They understand how the maps were put together. They're the only ones that understand how they were put together. So they need to be kept intact with that knowledge until, well, apparently 10 years, and the way I'm looking at it. That doesn't mean we have to meet once a month. We could meet 3 times a month, every third month. But, and it may be a short meeting. But I think they're the key players, and I think we need to continue with these key players unless a circumstance like Mike has indicated comes up where somebody doesn't qualify anymore. And I think that's the approach we should take, consistency. That's what we've done with everything else. So that's my approach on that.
Commissioner Witches?
Had a wild idea. What would prevent us, like, let's say we have all of the all pending litigation is done and we foresee that nothing's going to happen for the next couple election cycles, and because who knows what's going to happen in the future. Why can't we just put ourselves into a perpetual recess so that we actually never end? That way that if we were to have to reconvene for whatever reason, the chair of the commission at that particular point could do so. And then we don't have to worry about the whole term of expired, because we're still a body. We'll be the body of the commission for 10 years. We just won't be meeting, and we'll stand in recess until we need to meet. Is that way off in left field, or is that just something that I thought of and I should go take a nap now or something?
Commissioner Eid.
Well, I don't think it's out of left field, Dustin. I think that's pretty much what Commissioner Clark was saying too, and I think it's a good point. Why take all these risks, right, that we've talked about for the past 45 minutes? So maybe we should look into if it would be legally defensible to not, I don't know what the word is, not to stand, I suppose, and maybe meet every 6 months. I think history tells us we can assume that as more elections happen and more data comes available, there might be lawsuits in the future like there were in the past. So expecting that, why not prepare for it?
Yeah. I agree with that concept as well, because like I said, I mean, my primary concern is we have such short timelines to respond, and I don't want to handicap our ability to defend ourselves. And that I think that this language wasn't particularly thought through in terms of the possibility of later litigation. And I don't know, maybe we can look at going on a reduced status for a few years and, you know, reduce our salaries so that, you know, the salaries are lower and maybe meet, you know, every 6 months. Or, I mean, I think it's an idea worth exploring, because the reality is there's no statute of limitations on these challenges. I think the argument could be made that the litigation isn't done when there's no expiration date on the statute of limitations, but I think it's something that maybe we should get an outside opinion on. Maybe Baker Hostetler, ask them to weigh in on what they think. You know, I definitely think it's worth exploring, because there's lots of issues with just saying we're done and disbanding. And, you know, as Commissioner E just mentioned, you know, Mike Brady and I have spent 20 minutes talking about it, and we don't have any resolutions on it because they're all open questions. So any additional thoughts or comments, or do you guys, I don't think we're ready to move forward today. So do we want to move on to item 5B? Because I think we still need to think about this maybe a little bit more. Commissioner Orton.
Do you see
And then
Mike Brady?
Commissioner Curry.
His hand is up.
Oh, no, I didn't. Okay, Mike Brady and then Commissioner Curry.
Two thoughts. One, ultimately, I think, you know, the idea, of course, of engaging your lawyers to answer this question is a fine idea. I was going to offer, before you said that, I think the kind of immediate answer, you know, Dustin, as you put it out there, so you know, it's an interesting kind of parliamentary, you know, potential posture and kind of procedural approach. Unfortunately, I suspect the answer from Baker Hostetler, I'm like, thankfully you don't need to take my word for it, I'm not your lawyer, but I expect the answer to the question of, like, why can't you do that, is because I think the language in the Constitution, for whatever this is worth, I think that's fairly clear. And so, you know, it wasn't like people were like, hey, let's go on dormant, you know, let's, you know, do this or that. It's the particular provision in the Constitution that says when you have no more business and when you have no more litigation, and the threat of litigation, as the Supreme Court has talked about, is not the same thing as litigation, right? So like your October closed session, you went into that because you anticipated litigation on VRA. To be fair, you got litigation on VRA, but the Supreme Court was not convinced, because they said the threat of litigation is not the same thing as actual litigation. And so you've been able to go into closed session, for example, since then, when you actually had litigation, you were discussing litigation. So, you know, we'll see what your lawyers say. But I think that's the answer, personally. But a different idea comes to mind, which is all of these questions and this uncertainty, and something that does not seem to have been addressed, maybe, you know, at least not fully or clearly by my read, by the drafters of this amendment. You know, one of the things you could also consider asking your lawyers is about the possibility of asking the Supreme Court to weigh in preemptively, and say, hey, look, you know, put them on notice, put the public on notice that, you know, we don't get ahead of ourselves. We have 2 lawsuits pending right now, but assuming that at some point these are resolved and we then have no litigation pending, we are mindful of the history of litigation on this kind of matter, frankly, in the state of Michigan, looking back, you know, just 5 years ago or whatever, 5 years ago, and seeing this, you know, 7-year litigation that began in the 7th year. And, you know, you can look at other states as well. This is frankly, it's not uncommon. It may even be very common to see that kind of late stage litigation. And so as we contemplate that, it is foreseeable we are, you know, looking ahead at the possibility of that. On the one hand, you know, what do we do, Supreme Court, in the future when, like, if and when our maps are challenged? What will be the role of the secretary? What will be this or that? And then you can pose the question, and, you know, we tried this collectively last March and April. They did not take the bite on it at that time. They still might not take the bite on it on this sort of preemptive flagging, you know, in raising the question and asking for an answer. But I do think that there was value in the preemptive posing of that question last spring, because it informed the public at large of the challenges that all of us were struggling with the census delay. And that was part of the analysis, as I recall it, among the commission and between the commission and with MDOS, et cetera, about does it make sense to do this? And we said, well, maybe the Supreme Court will answer our question in the spring. They didn't. Maybe they won't. But even if they don't, there's still value, we thought. And I say to you now, what has it been, 10, 11 months later, that there was value for the public and for other people watching it to understand that you weren't going to hit your November 1st deadline, that the census delay was significantly impacting everybody's operations, all those other things. So raising the question preemptively might be worth looking into.
Okay.
Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Brady. Commissioner Curry and then Commissioner Winters.
Yes, excuse me. Yes, I think Mike kind of answered my question, but my question was going to be, as commissioners, can we, or should we have anything to do with kind of drawing something up and voting on it to see if, to at least hold something together for us so that everything will fall in place? And I know that Mike was saying that we should probably talk to the lawyers first. So that's one aspect of what my answer would have been.
Thank you, Commissioner Curry. Commissioner Witches?
So I guess the way that I'm reading where it says like the terms of the commissioner shall expire once the commission has completed its obligations for a census cycle, but not before any judicial review of the redistricting plan is complete. I consider a redistricting cycle a period of 10 years, and I don't consider our obligations to be done until those 10 years are expired or the 10 years pass. Because if something were to happen, it's us that have to come back. So in my mind, when it says when our obligations are done, I don't think our obligation ends just arbitrarily. Like, I think our obligations are there for the next, 9 years now. So that's just my thought. I'm probably wrong, but
Commissioner Orton and then Commissioner Rothorn.
Yeah, so rereading that, I think Dustin's interpretation could be right. I do agree that with Mike Brady that we should talk to our lawyers and see what their advice is. But my real concern is just that we need to be prepared to defend our maps that we created. And like Rebecca was saying, that, if the Secretary of State didn't reconvene us really quickly, but I'm thinking even if the Secretary of State does reconvene us at the earliest possibility, 7 days still, how are we going to get ourselves together, a public meeting, right. All those things? I just don't see it happening. So that's a real concern.
Yeah.
Commissioner Rothorn and then Commissioner Curry.
And I think the other part of this, so I just echo what Cynthia just said and what Commissioner Curry or Juanita just said too, like, and Dustin. I mean, frankly, it feels important that we consider 10 years. The part that's really important for me is to have our executive director and our outreach director understand how we stay relevant, because I just don't know what the cost to the reputation or to the image of the commission will be, right? To be paying ourselves and staff and meeting every 6 months. I guess what I'm asking is, Executive Director Hammersmith and Director Woods, please help us, right? We need to talk to our lawyers, but we also have to understand, like, what does our work look like? How do we stay relevant with the public's eye? I want more trust in our commission. I don't want to be perceived or even have people, because we don't say anything, because we're not be perceived as like, oh, they're just padding their wallets or whatever, right? That feels really important to understand from the outset. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Any more comments, Dustin Witches?
Sorry, I know we've been talking about this for forever, but I think MC makes a good point, and so I see it at potential two ways of doing it. One, we make a resolution to not pay us and then move into recess, but theoretically, you can't do that because the Constitution says for each year we're here, we get paid.
That's right.
So we move down to the minimum potentially. So,
I agree.
and then meet every 6 months. That would be fine. So
I'm wondering too on that, if like we have the discretion, and again, this could be an opinion for council, like move it down to that minimum and then say we get paid a per diem, get paid, if we meet twice a year, then we take that, whatever it is, $40,000, figure out a daily wage for it, and then we get paid for that per diem if there's not active litigation. I mean, I don't know if we could do that, but it's something to consider. I think it would be being good stewards of the public's money. I saw someone else's hand go up, Commissioner Lett, and I thought I saw someone else had their hand
You
up.
probably saw mine, but
Oh yeah, it was you, Commissioner Curry. Did you have another
Okay.
comment?
I'll hold it for a few.
Commissioner Lett?
I think all of y'all are overthinking this entire question. And I say that because it's fairly clear, regardless if we agree with it or not, the constitutional language says, as Mike Brady said, once all of the litigation is resolved, that the commission dissolves, expires, whatever you want to say. For us to come along and somehow say, well, we're going to keep going and we're going to keep getting paid somehow, I agree with MC. That is a slap in the face to the citizens of this state. If you go to the court, the Supreme Court, Michigan Supreme Court, and say, well, here's what might happen down the road. It happened in the 2010 to 2020 cycle that there was a lawsuit in, I think it was 2017. The court is going to say, because they always say, if it's speculative, just like they already said with us, if it's speculative, we're not going to rule on it. Bring us back something that's a case in conflict. And unless you have a case in conflict, they are more than likely going to say, we're not going to deal with it. You're speculating. We don't have to deal with speculation. We have to deal with real life.
Right.
So I think that if we want to come up with some procedure in conversation with the Secretary of State's office for the Secretary of State to reconvene the commission, then that would be appropriate. If we have a lawsuit filed and we have 7 days, or whoever has 7 days to respond, a response certainly can be, hey, we can't do it in 7 days, and here's why, and we need more time, and that would probably be granted. So those are my observations of this discussion, and I appreciate you listening to my ramblings and rantings.
All right, guys, you ready to move on? Does anybody need to take a break before we go to the next agenda item?
Yeah.
Okay. Can we recess for 10 minutes? Does that work for everybody? Just because I know we're really low on commissioners, so people can't step away. Commissioner Lett, did you have another comment on that? Your hand is still raised. No. Okay. All right. Hearing no objections, it's currently 10:57. We will stand in recess until 11:10. That way everybody can get up and attend to personal needs and come back. All right. We are in recess until 11:10. Thank you.
As a reminder for commissioners, because we haven't done virtual meetings in a while we're on break, if you could turn off your video and your microphones so that we can allow our interpreters to also have a break. Thank you.
I'm just waiting for everybody else, Juanita, Richard, to pop in so we can start. Here's Richard. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Commissioner Clark, are you online?
I am.
Okay, all right, I'm gonna get started then, guys. All right, I'd like to call this meeting of the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission back to order. It's 11:11 a.m. Will the Department of State please conduct a roll call?
Hi, commissioners. Please say present when I call your name and announce where you are attending remotely from. I will call on commissioners in alphabetical order, starting with Doug Clark.
Present, and I'm attending the meeting remotely from Macomb County, Michigan.
Juanita Curry,
Present and attending remotely from Detroit, Michigan.
Anthony Eade,
Present, remotely attending from Detroit, Michigan.
Brittany Kellum,
Present and attending remotely from Wayne County, Michigan.
Rhonda Lang, Steve Lett,
Present, attending remotely from Lee County, Florida.
Cynthia Orton,
Present, attending remotely from Battle Creek, Michigan.
MC Rothhorn,
Present, attending remotely from Lansing, Michigan.
Rebecca Satella,
Present, attending remotely from Wayne County, Michigan.
Janice Follett,
Present, attending remotely from Highland, Michigan.
Aaron Wagner, Richard Weiss,
Present and attending remotely from Saginaw Township, Saginaw, Michigan.
Dustin Witches,
Present and attending remotely from Howell, Michigan.
11 commissioners are present.
Thank you, Ms. Reinhardt. Next on our agenda is unfinished business item 5B, budget. Without objection, I'll ask our Executive Director Hammersmith to present this item. Hearing no objection, please proceed, Ms. Hammersmith.
Thank you and good morning, commissioners. At our last meeting, Commissioner Eade had asked if I would look at some comparative budgets for other independent redistricting commissions. So I did obtain that data and provided for you a spreadsheet. First, I want to let you know where we are with our first full fiscal year budget. You can see in the first column after the descriptions that the balance in our budget was $20.90. And that amount does have to be returned to the legislature. So that amount will be returned out of last year's fiscal year budget, which ended on September 30, 2021. The second column is our current budget in the current fiscal year from October 1, 2020 to September 30. From October 1, 2021 until September 30, 2022, the current fiscal year we're in. And as you are aware, that budget does anticipate that there could be a shortage around $827,000, again, depending on litigation. So from there, the next two columns are the Princeton gerrymandering project. They actually reviewed budgets of the previous independent commissions and suggested what they felt might be the budget that would be needed for this commission in its first and its second fiscal year. I do want to acknowledge that they anticipated in the first fiscal year that MDOS would contribute over $3 million. I continue to acknowledge MDOS for the support of this commission. They've been very generous at providing both staff to provide assistance to your staff in the commission, also providing the interpreters for all of the meetings. They cover all those costs. So the Bengali, Spanish, Arabic, and ASL translation and the closed captioning are all provided by MDOS, so they continue to support this commission. As you can see, Princeton gerrymandering suggested our first year budget should be $6 million. Again, we were under the $3.1 million appropriation. The second year, they anticipated a budget of about 4.7 million, 4.8 million. Again, depending on litigation, we'll see where that goes, but our current appropriation is just over 3.1 million. The next two columns are the Arizona Independent Commission from 2012 and 2022. So those were the main years of those budgets. You can see 10 years ago, they spent 3.7 million. And this year, their budget is 7.9 million. Their population is about 70% of the state of Michigan, so they are a smaller state, but reasonably comparable to Michigan. And then the last two columns are California. That is the budget for the entire redistricting cycle. They have their budget segmented into work product, so it's kind of difficult to work with fiscal years in those budgets. But for the entire cycle, 10 years ago, they spent about $10 million, including 3.5 million that was not an appropriation. It was grant monies that they went out and secured, and most of that went into their communications and outreach budget. And this year, their budget will be over 23 million. The state of California is about 4 times larger than Michigan. So divide the 23 by 4, and I think you would have a pretty good comparable. Our next step will be to do the report, the fiscal year report that we do owe the governor and the legislature according to the Constitution. We'll get that done post haste on our last fiscal year, and we'll initiate that return of $20.90. Are there any questions that I could answer?
Commissioner Rothorn?
It's just has to be said, like that's the staff salaries. We have the small and mighty staff, like right. The idea that the Princeton gerrymandering project estimated $1 million, right, in the first year, and we spent less than half. I just want to just very clearly acknowledge that we have a small and mighty staff and just incredible work. And I think we all as commissioners know that they were and have been taxed a great deal. So I just want to, really just salute and thank you and know that sometimes it hurts my heart that I don't know that we've done right by you, but I just really appreciate the work, and this budget really says it a lot. So thank you, the 3 staff members that we do have here, just really appreciate it. And
Thank
I don't
you
know if
on behalf of all of us.
Yep, I saw Doug. Yeah. Was that what you were just going to say, MC? Yeah. Commissioner Clark?
Yes, I'd like to say that my impression is that we did an exceptional job last year. And when you compare it to the other states, I don't think we even come close. We're way more efficient in getting the job done. And in my opinion, also, the job was done correctly and expeditiously as we move forward. So I think we all deserve a round of applause for each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Clark. Commissioner Eid, did you have your hand up?
Yes, 2 comments. I completely agree with the last 2 comments, but I think, while we're thinking about ways to improve this process in the future, we're understaffed, and that puts an undue burden on the staff that we do have, makes the job more stressful. And, we've talked a lot over the past year about burnout and of having, this job be one that people want to take in the future. And with our current staffing levels, I'm not sure that, anyone's gonna want to do the job that Sue Ann, Edward, and Julianne have done over the past year. So I really think we should, while we're putting together the future video, we need to look at having significantly more staff to make the burden a little lighter. And then second, Sue Ann, you mentioned grant money. And I'm wondering if that's something that we could possibly look into as well, seeing if there are any grants available, not only for our general budget, but also to see if there's grant money maybe to publicize what we've done nationwide. I believe California got a grant for something similar 10 years ago.
I believe California got their grant money primarily to gather public input And they did a good job of getting public input. I believe they got something like 25,000 comments. Edward can correct me if my number isn't correct. But again, they did that to secure the public input and to get people involved in their first ever redistricting process. Their money came from a California foundation. I do know that Michigan State has gotten grant money from that foundation for the work they have done to be supportive of redistricting in the state of Michigan. So I don't know that there are necessarily grant opportunities out there for this commission. And the Constitution does clearly state that the legislature needs to provide the funds to support any litigation against the maps that this commission develops. So I think it is a responsibility of the legislature to provide additional funding if it is needed. And it appears it will be.
All right, any other comments or questions for Sue? All right, so thank you. Oh, Commissioner Eid, you always wait till I'm ready to move on.
Last thing, I'm sorry. So, we have this data now. It's important data. The question is, what are we going to do with it? What comes next? Are there any recommendations?
Well, we would certainly use this data to go to the legislature. It provides good baseline information that would help inform the work that we're doing, that shows that this commission has been extremely efficient with the funds that have been provided, that the commission has done a great job with their budget. So knowing that the litigation is causing the budget to not be adequate during this current fiscal year, I think is a good case that we can make when we go to the legislature to ask for additional funding. I'm not sure we're quite there yet. I can tell you the litigation costs in December were $200,000. So in January, I'm sure will be very high also, as General Counsel has indicated with the pending cases. So the litigation costs will be high in the near future, and we'll just have to see what the future brings, after these two cases.
All right, so let's move on to our next business agenda item, which is new business. New business item 6A, considerations for a closed session to discuss litigation. Without objection, I will ask General Counsel Pastula to provide information about this agenda item. Please proceed, Ms. Pastula.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Given the status of our pending litigation, the commission has one case in state court currently and one case in federal court. I offer the resolution in the event the commission would like to have a closed session today to discuss it. The legal team does not have anything urgent to discuss with the commission in this regard. So if you'd like to schedule one for your next meeting, that would also be appropriate. The League of Women Voters response briefs were filed yesterday. Our response to the federal case is not due until February 18th. I would like to highlight for the commission that the plaintiffs have asked that the March 16th oral argument date be advanced. It would not change the briefing schedule, just the date of the oral argument. So I'll keep you posted on that. But again, it was just an opportunity in the event the commission would like to have a discussion today with outside counsel in regard to the pending litigation. And if not, again, after the next meeting, we'll have all the briefing done. And we also expect the Michigan Supreme Court to schedule oral argument in the League of Women Voters case very quickly, as they've done in the past. I do apologize for jumping back and forth between the two cases. And lastly, if the commission was desirous of having a closed session today, we would recommend that would start at 1 p.m. Thank you, Madam Chair.
The closed session to start at 1 p.m.? Not right now?
I'm sorry, some of the attorney, well, we could do it now. We have attorneys with availability that are unavailable from noon to 1. So certainly, and I know it does take a few moments to take the necessary votes, not only to convene, to whether to hold a closed session, but also to convene one.
Commissioner Lett.
General Counsel, you've provided all of the materials that have been filed to date, with the exception of the one that you just mentioned. Are there any decision points that the commission needs to make, or would this be just a review of the material you've already provided?
Through the chair to Commissioner Lett, this would be an opportunity for council to answer questions by the commission of any of the litigation. Yes, there are no outstanding there are no decision points that need to be made, or nothing urgent that the commission needs to be advised on of this time. And I just received a notice of filing that the plaintiffs in the federal case have filed a response in opposition to the motions to intervene. Again, there are two groups intervening in the federal lawsuit, asking to intervene in the federal lawsuit: Voters Not Politicians, as well as a group of Michigan voters. So there, hopefully that's responsive, Commissioner Lett.
Are we opposing the motions to intervene?
No.
General Counsel? Okay, thank you. Commissioner Orton. Go ahead, General
I just
Counsel.
think Commissioner Clark has something.
Okay, thank you.
In the chat.
Thank you. Commissioner Zatella, we did not support or oppose the request to intervene, is a more accurate answer.
Okay. Commissioner Clark.
Yes, I'd like to put forth a motion that we do not have a closed session today, then we have it in our next meeting, which is 2 weeks from today.
Does that require a motion, General Counsel?
Madam Chair, what I would recommend is that the commission adopt the resolution and just insert the date and set a time to meet at the next meeting, is what I would recommend.
Okay, so you're proposing the motion to adopt resolution 2022-0201 to call a closed session, but that the date of that closed session will be February 24th. Is that right? February 24th at a date and time to be set, or at a time to be set? Is that what you're suggesting?
Correct.
February 24th. I would, if the commission wanted to just pick a time, and then the agenda could be built around it. And that way council would also have that, that ability.
Do we want to say 11 a.m.? Does that work?
I was gonna friendly amend it to be 1 p.m. so people want to eat lunch or something before they have to talk to us about legal stuff, they can.
Okay, so Commissioner Clark, where are we at with your motion? And Commissioner Curry seconded it as well. So is that consistent with what the motion you want to make, that you want to make a motion to adopt that resolution, but with the date of February 24th?
That is consistent with what I had intended.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, Commissioner Clark?
Madam Chair, that is consistent with what I had intended.
Okay, consistent with what you intended. Did you have a specific time you wanted to put into it before we get to Commissioner Witch's potential motion to amend?
I think generally 1 o'clock has been the time that most of the attorneys have been available. They're the keys to this meeting.
Okay,
so I would say 1 o'clock.
Okay, so we have a motion to adopt resolution 2022-0201 to call a closed session on February 24th at 1 p.m. Commissioner Curry, is that what you were interested in seconding? Okay, and then Commissioner Witches, that renders your amendment unnecessary. Is there any discussion or debate on that motion to adopt the resolution? All right, I believe we're going to need a roll call vote to adopt the resolution. So Ms. Reinhardt, if you could take over with the roll call vote.
Certainly, I believe Commissioner Kellum had a hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Kellum.
Oh, no, it's okay. I would personally prefer an earlier time, but I know I'm just one commissioner just because of my schedule that day. 11 would fit better for me, but yeah, I'm just one person.
Commissioner Witches and then Commissioner Rothhorn.
I had to take a guess. How long do you think the closed session would be?
Commissioner Witches, at that point, we will have, again, I'm anticipating another oral argument completed in a very hefty series of briefs filed in the federal case. So I think the commission should plan for 1 hour and for being able to have a full discussion, and that way, that way, if you end earlier, then you end earlier, but for planning for expectations, I think reserving an hour would be appropriate.
Well, Commissioner Kellum, I do feel that you need to be here if at all possible, because this is pretty important. So with that said, I'd like to amend to make the start time at 11 a.m.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Witches to amend, seconded by Commissioner Rothorn to change the time to 11 a.m. Any discussion or debate on the amendment? So General Counsel, correct me or confirm for me the procedure. Do we need to have a roll call vote for the amendment as well, or can we just do a show of hands on the amendment?
No, Madam Chair, you can just do a show of hand. You can do a show of hands on the amendment, and I've confirmed that outside counsel representatives are available at either time.
Okay. All right, so let's do it by a show of hands, a vote on the amendment to change the time on February 24th to 11 a.m. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
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 All opposed, raise your hand and say nay. Okay, the ayes prevail and the amendment is adopted. So let's move back to the original motion, which is the motion to adopt. Hold on, let me read it off again. Resolution 2022-0201 to call a closed session pursuant to section 6.25, I'm sorry, 6.2.5 of the MICRC Rules of Procedure on February 24th at 11 a.m. And Ms. Reinhardt, if you could take the roll call vote, I would appreciate it.
Absolutely, Madam Chair. Commissioners, please indicate your support of the motion with a yes or no. I will call on commissioners in alphabetical order, starting with MC Rothorn.
Aye.
Rebecca Satella.
Aye.
Janice Follett.
Aye.
Richard Weiss.
Aye.
Dustin Witches.
Aye.
Doug Clark.
Yes.
Juanita Curry.
Aye.
Anthony Eade.
Yes.
Brittany Kellum.
Aye.
Steve Lett.
Aye.
Cynthia Orton.
Yes.
With unanimous support, 11 yes, the motion carries.
Thank you, Ms. Reinhardt. All right, we will move on to our next item on the agenda, which is 6B, consideration of contract extensions without objection. I will ask Executive Director Hammersmith to present this item. Hearing no objections, please proceed, Ms. Hammersmith.
Okay, good morning again. We have contracts for two of our consultants that end on February 28th, those being Federal Compliance Consulting, LLC, and Election Data Services. Considering that we may need them for any current or future litigation, it seems wise to extend those contracts each for 1 year. They hold the option for 2 one-year extensions, but right now we would recommend one-year extension. There is funding left in both of those contracts at the present time that can be utilized through this extension. If additional funds should be needed going forward, I would certainly come back to the commission, but right now these extensions would be for 1 additional year that would take it through February 28th, 2023. And then we could reassess at that time. Questions?
Any questions? Commissioner Horton?
Yeah, I can't remember how those contracts are written, but since we don't even know for sure if we are going to be a commission for the next year, it seems a little strange to renew a contract for a year. So is that just, is it more like a retainer situation where they get paid if we have to use them, if we need to redraw maps or whatever the services are that they would render. Can
Or
you
if they,
explain that a little bit?
for example, expert testimony in court, if needed, something of that nature. So yes, it would just be the availability to have these people available to the commission if the case arose. They are not paid until the work is completed and they've submitted an invoice. So if they do no work, they get the payment.
Okay, Commissioner Clark.
Yes, I'd like to put a motion forward for the federal, I don't know the exact nomenclature.
Federal Compliance Consulting.
Federal Compliance Consulting, and we renew their contract for a year, and then we deal with the other one separately as well.
Okay, so we have a motion to adopt our resolution 2022-0202, which was to extend federal compliance contract for 1 year with no additional funds. We have a second. Commissioner Witches, I see we have a second. Any discussion or debate on the motion? All right, seeing none, let's go ahead and vote. All in favor of adopting resolution 2022-0202, extend federal compliance contract for 1 year with no additional funds, raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, raise your hand and say nay. Okay, the resolution is adopted. And then Commissioner Clark, you wanted to address election data services separately?
Yeah, I'm not going to address it. I'll let some of the others address it. I think we need to deal with them in a different method because of the nature of their business. So I'll welcome some comments from some of the others on how to deal with them.
Madam Chair.
Yes, General Counsel.
Thank you so much. Just for the record, I'd like to note that the extension was approved by a member of each of the selection pools as required by the Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments on election data services? Commissioner Witches?
I was going to say, wouldn't that be the same as Mr. Adelson? Like it would just be if we need them for expert testimony and all that, or if we need to have them come back and help us draw.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine it would be the exact same thing.
Yep.
Yes, and both of those contracts were written in a similar manner with the options for 2 1-year extensions. So we're just suggesting implementing the first 1 year.
Yeah, I didn't understand how that second one was written. So
Okay, well, I'd like to make a motion then to extend the contract to election data services for another period of 1 year.
Okay, so we have a resolution that's been presented, resolution 2022-0203 to extend election data services contract for 1 year. Commissioner Witches, I'm assuming that's what you want to adopt.
That's correct.
We get a second on that.
I second.
Commissioner Curry, I see your hand up, so I'll give that one to you. So we have a motion and a second to adopt resolution 2022-0203, extend election data services contract for 1 year. Any discussion or debate on the motion? All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
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 All opposed, raise your hand and say nay. All right, the resolution is adopted. We're going to move on to agenda item 6C, future staffing considerations. Without objection, I'll ask Executive Director Hammersmith to provide information about item 1, Sarah Martinez. Please proceed, Ms. Hammersmith.
Thank you. Given the fact that we are losing 1 staff person toward the end of the month, it would seem wise to keep Sarah Martinez available to this commission if the need arises. So she did take a full-time job, but she indicated she would be available to this commission around 10 hours a week. I've asked in the resolution up to 15. I don't anticipate ever needing that, but should a project come along that required 15 hours one time, that would give us that option. I really do have a sense that it's going to be 10 hours or less, and it will be again on an as-needed basis. So she would continue at her same rate of pay at the request going forward, starting in March with Edward or me. And I would ask that this this contract be extended retroactive to February 1. She did not work last week and did not turn in hours. However, I think it would be much cleaner with Kelly Services just to initiate a contract extension that would start when the other one finished. So that's the request, and there's a resolution provided for that.
Any discussion on this point? If not, I would consider a motion to approve resolution 2022-0204, offer contract extension to Sarah Martinez. Commissioner Orton.
So moved.
Okay, we've got a motion by Commissioner Orton, seconded by Commissioner Weiss. Any discussion or debate on the motion? All right, we have a motion and a second to approve resolution 2022-0204, contract extension to Sarah Martinez. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, raise your hand and say nay. By a vote of 11-0, the resolution is adopted. We will continue to new business agenda item 6C, future staffing considerations, item 2, consideration for managing general counsel responsibilities. We've received memos from our executive director and general counsel. Without objection, I will ask our executive director Hammersmith to provide information, followed by general counsel Pastula. Please proceed, Ms. Hammersmith.
Thank you. For your information, I provided the key points of the job description for the commission to consider. A significant work of the general counsel position has been completed at this time. I thank Julianne for all the work she did in putting together drafts of procedures and policies for this commission, for her assistance with all the contracts for the public hearings. There were AV contracts, there were venue contracts, and there were hotel contracts. So she did a great deal of work. The consultant contracts, there was a lot of help in that area, along with MDOS, who was very helpful to us in putting together the contracts and the processes and procedures, and for getting consultants in place for this commission. The maps have been adopted, so you know, a lot of work has been done in the last year, and we're appreciative of that. The primary work at this time appears to be legal advice to the commission and the staff, providing legal memoranda, and keeping the commission and staff updated regarding the litigation. So it's communication role. Secondly, she is the program manager for our legal contracts, the primary staff contract, and she does review and approve the invoices and helps direct the paralegal who's been working in research for the litigation. Thirdly, she serves as our parliamentarian and our FOIA manager. Mike Brady has agreed to attend meetings going forward and serve as the parliamentarian at the meetings. And MDOS has agreed to accept FOIAs and be the FOIA manager for the commission. So that leaves options then for, if the commission chooses those, they could choose something different, but I think those are pretty good resolutions for those areas of responsibility. That leaves those first two areas of her work that some options have been provided to this commission for those. So for the first one, the primary communication piece, our legal counsel or litigation counsel can come to meetings and present updates to this commission at any meeting. They can provide the legal memoranda that we get in writing. We could appoint a commissioner to serve as a liaison, providing the communication updates to the commission, or utilize our staff to be the liaison. But in talking with David Fink over the last couple of weeks, he indicated that he feels he could provide the basic legal work to this commission. He said he'll do everything but approve the invoices, which I said, okay, you can't do that. But certainly we would not allow him to approve his own invoices. But Fink Bresic is willing to serve in that role as kind of a general counsel who we could reach out to if we wanted to develop a new procedure or policy or needed assistance with reviewing amendments to policies. And, you know, he is more than willing to assure that his firm handles the basic things that would happen on a weekly basis that would be needed. We can also utilize existing staff to coordinate the program manager aspect. So certainly Edward and/or I can communicate with legal counsel. MDOS certainly communicates with us, and you know, when litigation would come, we could certainly be the communication liaison. So I think what's really needed at this point is good communication. So this commission is very aware of what's going on in regards to any litigation. And that is a role that Fink Bresic, I believe, and your staff can handle. But those are the options that we're presenting. Julianne, I know, explored the Attorney General office, and she may wish to speak further, but I will turn the floor over to her and let her expound, explain more about her role.
General Counsel. Oh, Commissioner Curry, did you have a comment first? I can't hear you. You're on mute. You're still on mute. Commissioner Clark has a comment too. Commissioner Curry, while you sort out.
Commissioner Curry, is it your computer that needs to restart?
Yes,
Yeah.
okay, so she needs to restart, okay. Commissioner Clark, did you have a comment?
No, my comment was, I think it's appropriate, given that Julianne's leaving us, that she identify and document or explain her job tasks, but not recommendations on where we should go. I think recommendations should be a commission driven item and not an item of somebody that's going to be leaving the commission's work. That's my approach toward this.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Ms. Pastula, did you have any follow-up on what Executive Director Hammersmith presented?
No, Madam Chair, nothing to add. Thank you.
Okay. Any additions, Commissioner Lett?
I move we retain the Fink firm to act minimally within a necessary legal issues that come up once Julianne has left the commission.
I second that.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Lett, seconded by Commissioner Clark to retain the Fink firm to handle any legal, go ahead and restate it for me, Commissioner Lett, so I don't mess that up. Sorry.
To handle any legal requirements that would arise once General Counsel has blessed the commission.
Thank you. Any discussion or debate on the motion? Okay, all in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, raise your hand and say nay. All right, by a vote of 11-0, the motion is adopted. All right, I think at this point we can move on to agenda item 6D. Oops, I'm sorry, I skipped one. 6C, future staffing considerations, item 3 and 4. I'd like to ask the commission for input regarding extensions of contracts for the communications and outreach director and executive director positions. So both of those agreements expire as of March 31st, 2022. So we need to make a decision if we're going to extend those. Go ahead, Commissioner Orton.
Before we move on to that, I think that we need to decide like who's going to fill the communication, the gap between Fink, Bresic, and the commission. So I propose that our staff members do that, a staff member, whichever staff member is fine.
Okay, so is that a motion to have staff take over the communication function between Fink, Bresic, and Baker Hostetler and the commission?
Yes, please.
Okay. Can we get a second on that? Second by Commissioner Rothorn. Any discussion or debate on that? All in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, raise your hand and say nay. Okay, the motion is adopted. Commissioner Executive Director Hammersmith.
Following along with that, is the desire of this commission then to also have MDOS coordinate the parliamentarian role and the FOIA requests that come in?
Commissioner Orton?
Yes, I would like to motion that both of those happen. However she said that, that was good.
A motion to have Michigan Department of State coordinate the FOIAs and the parliamentarian role for the commission.
I second that.
Second by Commissioner Clark. Sarah Reinhardt, I saw you pop on camera and then you popped back off. Did you have a comment?
Sue got to it first. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. So we have a motion to have the Michigan Department of State handle the FOIA coordination requests and then also act as the parliamentarian with respect to the commission. Any discussion or debate on the motion? All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
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 All opposed, raise your hand and say nay. Okay, by a vote of 11-0, the motion is adopted. All right, anything else we need to cover, Executive Director Hammersmith?
I think we've covered it. Thank you.
Okay, all right. So now let's move on to future staffing considerations, items 3 and 4 for both the Communications and Outreach Director and Executive Director positions. So we have 2 staff positions, both of which expire on March 31st. Did we want to extend those? Did we want to change the number of hours or the pay? We need to sort of make a decision on whether we're extending those contracts. Commissioner Lett?
I move that both contracts be extended at the same rate and hours of pay as they currently are.
Okay. For how long? Did you have a term?
I would say for 3 months.
All right. Did we get a second on that? Commissioner Orton?
I'm not, well, okay, second, and then I have a comment.
Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Orton.
Can we word it somehow that it ends when we end? I mean, we can't possibly say that it's for a year because we don't know if we'll be a commission for a year. So it's tied to the other issue that we were discussing, and I don't know the answer.
Commissioner Rothorn?
And I think they need help understanding what, none of us has job security, right? But I think that's the point, is that, right, that our fates are tied, right? When we, we have to have staff. And so it just feels really important that we give them some sense of, like, as we wrestle with this, that, right, that we connect the end date and sort of with ours. So I think what I heard Cynthia suggesting was what I'm hoping we might adopt.
Madam Chair.
Yes, General Counsel.
So what I'm hearing is that as far as extending staff contracts, the initial proposal was a 3-month term, and now the commission is discussing an alternate term. I would advise against an evergreen contract that just doesn't end, particularly given the earlier conversation about the uncertainty and the lack of clarity on when the commissioner's terms would be ending. And I think giving a contract term, 3 months, 6 months, whatever, certainly whatever the commission decides, it gives the commission the opportunity to go ahead and do further extensions or other modifications as it sees fit. It's just when you have a set contract term, it allows you, particularly since their staff reviews aren't done or anything like that, it allows the commission to, again, have that expectation that the contracts will be circling back up. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, Commissioner Clark and then Commissioner Witches.
This is Commissioner Clark. I would like to make an amendment to the original motion that we increase the salaries of the executive director and the communications director by 5%.
Okay, I'll second that. So we have a motion to amend the original motion by Commissioner Clark to increase salaries by 5%. I seconded that. Any discussion or debate on that? And then Commissioner Richards, I saw your hand up as well.
Before Dustin talks, I would consider that a friendly amendment and would accept it.
Okay, so we have a friendly amendment that is accepted by Commissioner Lett. Commissioner Clark Commissioner Witches, did you have any comments?
Well, not in regards to that. I was going to say that I think that the 3-month extension is completely fair at this particular point in time, because of the fact that we're going to be getting opinions from our legal teams on how we're going to handle ourselves. So until we really know, we should be continuing to just extend on a quarterly basis. So I feel like that should be how we do it.
Okay, any additional discussion? All right, so we have a motion by Commissioner Lett, seconded by Commissioner Orton to extend the contracts. I'm going to break these up. Commissioner Lett for Edward Woods III, Communications Outreach Director, for 3 months with a 5% increase in pay. Any further discussion or debate on that motion as to Edward Woods? Okay, all in favor of that portion of the motion, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 All opposed, raise your hand and say nay. Okay, by a vote of 11-0, the motion was adopted, and then we're going to deal with Executive Director Hammersmith separately. So we have a motion for Executive Director Hammersmith to extend her contract for 3 months and increase the rate of pay for 5%. Any additional discussion or debate on that, Commissioner Lett?
I'd like to amend that to 7%. 5% doesn't even cover cost of living now. Inflation's running about 7%, so I would amend that to 7%.
Okay, I will second your amendment. So is there any discussion or debate on the amendment? Okay, all in favor of, this is the amendment of the primary motion to increase Executive Director Hammersmith's pay by 7%. Please raise your hand and say aye.
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 All opposed, raise your hand and say nay. Okay, by a vote of 11-0, the amendment is adopted. So at this point, we'll go back to the primary motion, which is the motion to extend Executive Director Hammersmith's contract by 3 months with a 7% increase in pay. Any discussion or debate on that motion? All in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, raise your hand and say nay. And in fairness, I would now consider a motion to amend the prior action against Edward Woods or with Edward Woods to make his rate of pay increase 7% as well.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Lett. Commissioner Witches, did you second that? You second? Okay. Any discussion or debate on the motion? Okay, all in favor of increasing Edward Woods III's rate of pay by 7% instead of 5%, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 All opposed, raise your hand and say nay. Okay, by a vote of 11-0, that contract extension and increase of pay is also adopted. All right, at this point, we are going to move on to new business agenda item 6D, consideration of in-person meeting in March. Without objection, I will ask Communications and Outreach Director Edward Woods III to present this item. Please proceed, Mr. Woods. And Commissioner Lett, did you have a comment before that?
Just let everybody know, it's been nice visiting with you today, and I have to leave. Bye.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Lett. All right, so Commissioner or Mr. Woods.
Well, first and foremost, thank you to the commission for the extension and the raise. I greatly appreciate it. So I want to say thank you. I see our executive director is nodding as well. It's been, Sue reminded me earlier last week that I've spent a year, and I shared with her, it seems like we've been here much longer than a year because of the great work that has been done by the commission. One of the things that we are doing with our lessons learned video is getting background information and orientation Just this week, our executive director, Sue Hammersmith, and our general counsel, Julianne Pastolo, was providing background material with regards to constructing the report. But there will be a time when we'll need to interview the commissioners with regards to that. And we just thought it would be easier if we could do it when we had an in-person meeting. Seeing that the contracts have been extended, we could possibly look at doing that now in April. Did not want to leave anything unturned before I left with regards to this project. And so if we are looking at April to come back to in-person meetings, that would be really helpful. They want to set up 2 dates to tape, 1 day in Lansing and 1 date in Detroit. And if we look at the schedule, we were doing the 2nd Thursday in Detroit and the 4th Thursday in April. And I know we have a moratorium, I should say. We have our meetings virtual, I shouldn't say moratorium, until the end of March. And so maybe we can just go ahead and just look at doing that in April, because of the previous action that was taken.
So just to clarify, so you're talking about having the taping done in April, is that right?
Correct. And I
Okay.
just wanted to do it after the meeting. They would identify venues, and they could also tape the other folks that they're planning to tape in the Metro Detroit area, as well as in the Lansing area. And so we could identify those dates. In Detroit, it would be for those who actually live in the Metro Detroit area. So for those that need to plan their schedules, we want to make sure we give plenty of time. And so the date that we're looking at would be April 14th. I do want to remind you that that is Easter weekend. So I don't know if that's going to be a challenge in terms of that date, but just want to throw that out there. And then April 28th would be the one in Lansing, and we would set up recording that particular day.
Any questions or comments for our executive director Woods, or I'm sorry, communications outreach director Woods? All right, seeing none. Is there anything else you need to add, Director Woods?
Nope, we just need to make sure that we set meeting dates. Obviously, I'd work with MDOS to make sure we have locations, but it's just an understanding that those meetings in April would be in person. Those who live in the Metro Detroit area, we would set up a taping on the 14th. And those who live in the Lansing, closer to Lansing, we would set up taping on the 28th.
Executive Director Hammersmith, do we need to specify locations for those meetings, or do we already have meetings specified? Is there something I'm just asking, is there anything we need to do at this point?
I don't believe at this point, we will need to make sure that MDOS can find venues for those meetings, and then we can come back to the commission at a later time to clarify that.
Okay. All right. Well, if we are done with that agenda item, we can move on to approval of meeting minutes. Thank you, Mr. Woods. So next on the agenda is approval of the meeting minutes from January 27th meeting held via Zoom. These draft minutes have been provided to the commission prior to this meeting and are posted on the website. Are there any edits to the meeting minutes? All right, seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
Moved.
Motion made by Commissioner Witches. Seconded by Commissioner Weiss. I see you down there waving your hand. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All opposed, raise your hand and say nay. The meeting minutes are adopted. We have
Commissioner
two.
Clark, could you indicate what your vote was?
I voted affirmative.
Thank you.
Thank you. So moving on to agenda item 8, there are 2 staff reports today. Without objection, I will ask General Counsel Pastula to provide her report. Please proceed, Ms. Pastula.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was able to cover the topic earlier in the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Woods, did you have a staff report?
Yes.
Okay.
Just really want to share and express appreciation to the commission What's being lost, and I really want you to give yourselves a round of applause, is that you fulfilled the mission. And what I mean by you fulfilled the mission, you demonstrated that citizens, not legislators, could actually get maps approved despite personality conflicts and differences. And that's exactly what took place. That's exactly what took place. I've updated my counts and I've noticed that we have now done 250, I repeat, 250 outreach activities. The commission has participated in 101 presentations. They have done 42 scheduled media interviews. This does not count feedback after you do after a meeting or people or the press. These are 42 actual media interviews and 7 outreach activities, most notably the fairs that Commissioner Lang has done. And I just really want to give a pat on the back. You know, there's conflict and contention is always part of the process, but let's not forget the main thing was always the main thing, and that maps were approved. They were approved according to a deadline that was modified because of the delay of census. And that's a tribute that personal differences were set aside to ensure that the commission fulfilled its mission. And so I really would like to salute each and every one of you, remind you of that. You know, irregardless of what the press reports may say, there's been a lot of feedback that I have received on behalf of the commission that you all stuck together and worked together despite the differences. And just really want to salute you on that and make sure that remains our focus as we go through these lawsuits and get our maps approved so that we have the best maps. You know, before we were known as the worst gerrymandering maps in the country, that we are known now as the best maps in the country. And what you all did as a commission becomes the norm and not the exception to ensure that all citizens have a part in the redistricting process. Nearly 30,000, you know, Nancy Wang said on the show, nearly 30,000 comments. And that was more than the entire state of California, which is 4 times larger than Michigan. So once again, kudos to Commissioner Zatella, Commissioner Rothhorn, Commissioner Clark, Commissioner Eid, Commissioner Kellum, Commissioner Orton, Commissioner Vallette, Commissioner Witches, Commissioner Weiss, Commissioner Wagner, Commissioner Lang, and I want to make sure I'm not forgetting anybody because everyone has done an outstanding job and just want to say thank you. And then last but not least, would like to thank my colleagues who also participated in the presentations and the outreach. Our executive director, Sue Ann Hammersmith, our general counsel, Julianne Pastula, as well as our executive assistant, Sarah Martinez. And last but not least, one last shout out to MDOS and their staff in terms of the website and the communications that they have assisted with has just been outstanding. So just want to share that with you as we are continuing to move forward and letting you know that you fulfilled the mission, you accepted the assignment, and we do have better maps. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Woods, for that rousing applause to the commission. Thank you. Without objection, I'll ask Sarah Reinhardt from the Michigan Department of State for her report. Hearing no objection, please proceed, Ms. Reinhardt.
Hi, commissioners. I do actually have an update for you today. I wanted to talk a little bit about what's going to happen to commissioners' equipment and staff equipment and any notes or files that you have with you once there are staff departures or when and if the commission disbands or goes dormant. So laptops and phones will be handed into the Department of State prior to staff departures or commissioner departure. And they will be imaged by DTMB, which means that it's basically taking kind of a picture of the state of your device as it is right now, including records, programs, and any kind of documents on there. And that'll be done to both your laptop and your phones. And then they will be placed in what's called a litigation hold. So essentially, this means that all of your devices will be stored in a locker in a state facility for really the next 10 years. In the event that the commission does go dormant and reconvenes, if new litigation arises, the Department of State would then be able to redistribute your laptops and phones to you all. So keep in mind that the lifespan of laptops and technology nowadays is typically around 4 years. Most of us are about halfway through that already. So if the commission encounters litigation after that benchmark, you could consider at that time, once you're reconvened, purchasing new laptops that would be able to keep up with the state of technology at that time. And if that does occur, the images that were taken from the imaging of your computers and your phones would be able to be placed on those new devices. So you would have access to all your records and documents, and it would be just as if you're accessing or utilizing your technology today. Furthermore, the only thing I wanted to add is I think we've talked a little bit about records retention in the past. To the extent that any commissioners have paper documents or notes, all of those will need to be retained and will be turned over to the Department of State from both departing staff and departing commissioners. And I'm happy to take any questions about that.
Any questions? All right, not seeing any, so thank you, Ms. Reinhardt. We will move on. And Commissioner Clark, I do see that you have one more item to discuss, but can we do that in announcements, or do you want to do it right now, Commissioner Clark? I'm not sure what you wanted to.
It doesn't matter when we do it.
Okay, why don't you just go ahead?
I want to go back to the extension of our contract with our mappers.
Okay.
And what I would like to put forth a motion that they've got 30 days, starting from today, to get the mapping software working correctly on every one of the PCs. We've got, I think, about 3, maybe 4 of the commissioners who cannot use their mapping software at this point in time. And whether they're going to use it or not, my belief is that our vendor should make sure that it is functional in case they need to use it. So I'd like to put that motion forward.
Oh, hold on one second. So we still have a quorum, Ms. Reinhardt, correct? I noticed Cynthia Orton has dropped. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Are we good? MC Rothorn, we're just down to 9.
I'm going to count. I believe when Commissioner Curry left, we were at 9. So if Commissioner Orton has also left now,
yep,
I believe we're below quorum.
Yeah.
Which means that we can, and correct me if I'm wrong, General Counsel, we can still, or the commission can still continue, but cannot conduct any votes.
Right.
Correct. The only vote appropriate to take, would be the motion to adjourn. But you're just receiving staff reports now. Oh, excuse me, Commissioner Clark was
he had a motion,
offering a motion. Correct. Yeah, no, that would not be in order with less than a commission quorum. Pardon me, of the commission.
Okay, so Commissioner Clark, I will just ask that we will just put that as a future agenda item because we no longer have a quorum. So we will add that to our next agenda item to discuss that.
That'll work fine, and we'll discuss the amount of time associated with it.
All right, Commissioner Witches.
I have another future agenda item potentially.
Okay, go ahead.
We did just extend 7% raises for inflation. I think we need to consider that for all of us as well. Based off of our actual salaries, we're not like adding 7% to the governor's salary. That would be ridiculous, but 7% based off of what we are currently making now. And we can discuss that at our next meeting.
Okay, all right, we will add that as another future agenda item. All right, any other future agenda items?
Cynthia's back.
Back with us.
Okay, so
I'm sorry, my computer restart.
No, I knew that was going to happen. So I was watching for when you dropped because I thought we were pretty low. So, okay. So Doug, do you want to address this right now or do you want to have it on the future agenda item?
No, I'd like to take care of it right now.
Okay. So Cynthia, I'm not sure if you caught what he had made a motion to require our vendor EDS within 30 days to make sure that all commissioners have functioning software on their computer. And I don't believe we received a second because we were checking on a quorum in between. Is someone interested in seconding that?
I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Clark, seconded by Commissioner Orton to require EDS within 30 days to make sure that all commissioners have functioning software on their computers. Is there any discussion or debate on that motion? Here,
Just want to note for the record that because we were talking about issues of quorum, Commissioner Clark and Commissioner Rothorn are both present. They just have their video off right now.
Yeah.
So we do have a quorum. Thank you. Okay,
Commissioner Ede, thank you, Ms. Reinhardt.
We have tech support in the current contracts. Who's having trouble with their software?
Commissioner Clark, did you know who's? I know Commissioner Lang had said that she had problems, but I'm not sure if those were resolved. Executive
Orton had problems as well.
Who has?
Yeah, I had lots of problems with mine, and it's currently not working.
I've had intermittent problems, but I don't have problems anymore.
Okay. Any additional comments, Commissioner Ede?
And I have one other comment. I believe Commissioner Wager doesn't have it installed, and I think it needs to be installed on her machine, whether she wants it or not.
Okay. All right. Go ahead, Commissioner Orton.
I'll just add, it wasn't a problem since we drew maps collaboratively, but wanting, if the case arose where we each needed to be able to do it on our own, it wouldn't work in the state that it's in right now. So it depends on what we're going to need in the future, whether we actually need to have it working on each individual computer, but there are some issues.
Okay. Sue?
Commissioner Wagner is up to date with her software. Whether it works or not, I'm unsure, but the last conversation I had with her, she had received all of the updates and she did have the software. And does everybody on this meeting, is everybody okay with the exception of Commissioner Orton on their software? And I'll just reach out to the others then. Thank you.
All right, so let's go ahead and vote on this motion that we have before us. It's a motion to require EDS to make sure everybody's software is working within 30 days.
Madam Chair, I believe Commissioner Villette had a hand raised for discussion.
Oh, okay, Commissioner Villette.
I just wanted to say I do have the software, but I did not get all of the updates and I haven't used it either. So, but whatever the commission decides, I will certainly go along with it.
Well, I don't think the intention of the motion is that you have to have EDS update your software if you don't want to. It's just to make sure that those that want to, I think, have functioning software. Commissioner Orton.
So just a question for Commissioner Clark. Yes, I think we all should have working software all the time, but as of right now, we don't know of any need for it. So can you just speak more to your motion? Because I may have missed something when I was off.
Yeah, given that we don't have the need now, or it is a perfect time to get it updated, make sure it's functional for everybody. We don't want a fire drill at the last minute. So let's get it working, let's maintain it like it should be maintained and like we're paying this company to do for us.
Okay, I think we're ready to take a vote. All in favor of the motion to require EDS to make sure all commissioners have functioning software in 30 days, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
And Commissioner Clark, did you vote yay or nay? I didn't catch yours.
I voted yay.
Okay, so by a vote of 8-1, the motion is adopted. Commissioner Witches.
Well, now that we have a quorum again, should we address what I brought up or should we wait?
It's entirely up to you.
Cynthia, I know you weren't here, but what I added as a future agenda item was, since we just extended our contracts to everybody based on with a raise on inflation alone, I suggested that would be done to all of us as well, based off of our current dollar amount. So not adding anything to what the governor's salary percentage is that's in the Constitution. Because I don't know about LU, but inflation kind of is hurting everybody. So I don't know if we should do it now or we should do it later. If anyone wants to make a motion for it, go ahead. I'll probably second it. If not, we can talk about it next meeting.
I think we should talk about that at the next meeting. Just want to think about it.
Commissioner Weiss?
Yes, I was thinking the same thing, that maybe we should wait till we have more of the commissioners available and then discuss this when we have at least 12, 13 of us here.
Yeah.
That's perfectly fair.
Okay. All right. So moving on, correspondence received in advance of our meeting today was provided along with written public comments to the commissioners in our meeting materials. We've already talked about future agenda items. Are there any announcements? All right, hearing no announcements, as the items on the agenda are completed and the commission has no further business, a motion to adjourn is in order. May I have a motion to adjourn? Motion made by Commissioner Witches, seconded by Commissioner Weiss. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, raise your hand and say nay. All right, the ayes prevail and the meeting is adjourned at 12:22 p.m. Thank you, everybody.